Welcome to Pat's Papers. I'm Pat Kiernan. This is our daily rundown of headlines from all across the country. More Americans are insourcing. That's on page 1 of the Washington Post today. A Washington Post ABC News poll shows 2/3 of Americans are cutting back on their spending. Households are turning to do-it-yourself products instead of having somebody else do the job. More home hair dye is selling. Sewing kit sales have increased 30% at Walmart. Another read on the economy comes from the latest home sales numbers. The Arkansas Democrat-Gazette notes the national home resale number is at a 12-year low. While we're on the front page of that newspaper, this one and many others have this photo or a similar photo from Amsterdam after the crash yesterday of a Turkish Airlines plane. More than 100 people walked away from the crash, but 9 were killed. Both the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times lead today with stories about the taxes on the wealthy that President Obama is planning. We are getting specifics now. The formula, it seems, involves reducing the percentage a high-income earner is entitled to when calculating the deduction you get for a charity contribution or your mortgage interest. You can deduct as much as 35% of that now. It would go down to a 28% deduction. The New York Times story says this move introduces a potentially volatile political edge to the congressional debate over the president's priorities. The headline on the budget proposal in the Chicago Tribune asks, is it a fiscal fantasy? One former budget director says the numbers don't add up. If the president really wants to cut the deficit in half by the end of his term, he won't be able to do all that he says he wants to do on the spending side. On the spending plans, the Washington Post highlights the $634 billion allocated to health care. The president described it as a very substantial down payment toward universal health coverage. The New York Times says criticism was widespread for Bobby Jindal's Republican response to the president's speech 2 nights ago. The 37-year-old Louisiana governor had been talked about as a potential presidential candidate in 2012. Gail Collins, the columnist, is among those not impressed. In her column this morning, she says his delivery sounded like a junior high schooler's entry in the Chamber of Commerce speaking contest. A Baltimore Sun story reaffirms that cutting calories is the way to lose weight. A study in the New England Journal of Medicine concludes it doesn't really matter what diet you're on, just as long as you're on one. Doctors tested 4 different diets with a sample of 800 overweight participants. They found weight loss was primarily linked to the calorie count and not to the type of food or the exact specifics of the diet. There was a lot that I liked in the New York Times today. I found not 1 but 2 stories about the butt to add to my list. First, there's this article. It says many Americans don't realize when they push manufacturers for the softest toilet paper, they are pushing the products away from recycled fiber. The greenest toilet paper, unfortunately, is a little rougher on you than the stuff made from fresh trees. In fashion news, the Times reports more men are buying pants that show off their butt. The typical cut on trousers for work has been baggy, but the Times says a trend toward more fitted clothing above the waist for men is now moving south. One tiny little item, not entirely new news, but it's the first I've seen of it. Apparently there's been an agreement among cell phone manufacturers. Believe it or not, they have agreed they are going to standardize the power cord for cell phones so that they're all the same. They'll all use that little mini USB plug. The only snag is that they've got 3 years to comply, so they'll have to contend with all the different power cords for a while. The world's most famous solar car has made it to Silicon Valley. Marcelo DeLuz is trying to set a solar car distance record. It's not always been easy. Residents in one Alaska town he passed through called the cops to report a UFO rolling through their neighborhood. They are back, blood-sucking bed bugs on the march again. After being supposedly eradicated or nearly eradicated 50 years ago, the Chicago Tribune says bed bug complaints in that city doubled from 2007 to 2008. My favorite headline of the day was in the New York Post, page 7. I'll be careful as I read this. You gotta be sittin' me. An Yves Saint Laurent chair the Post calls hideous sold at an auction for $28 million. We say farewell to Liz Smith today. Her gossip column appears for the final time in the New York Post. It will continue in syndication and online, so we're not really saying goodbye. But she will not be in a New York City paper. She says it is exhilarating to be fired at the age of 86. The New York Daily News with some vacation photos of Rihanna. She's said to have held a grim expression since suffering those bruises in the alleged assault on Grammy weekend. She's vacationing in Mexico now. This is the final TV season for new episodes of ER. The New York Times says no actor has been part of that series for the entire run. But about 20 of the crew members have been with the show from start to finish. They offer their perspective on the end of one of the most successful TV shows in history. The headline on the Times article is 15 years of blood, fake, sweat, and tears, real. Speaking of television milestones, USA Today notes tomorrow's episode of Wheel of Fortune will be the 5,000th for the show. It is still hugely successful in its 26th year. And finally, a story picked up in many papers from People magazine by way here of the Kansas City Star. First Lady Michelle Obama says they have picked the White House dog, a Portuguese water dog. They expect the dog will arrive in early April, although the exact date is the subject of some negotiation between Sasha and her mother. They have already ruled out a few potential names. Frank and Moose were offered up early, but quickly rejected. And that's all the time we have for today. I'm Pat Kiernan. Thank you for joining me. Go to patspapers.com for links to all of these stories.